Penn State trying to reach elite level in the Big Ten and across the nation, unfortunately loses some of the best defensive linemen in the country for 2016. Mark Rogers TV in Big Ten country at Happy Valley with Tim Aydin from Black Shoe Diaries breaking down Penn State's defensive line. Devastating front in 2015. Austin Johnson off to the NFL along with Carl Nassib and Anthony Zettel. Johnson, 78 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. We know where Carl Nassib came out of nowhere, wasn't a starter, and was a defensive player in the Big Ten and nationally. 19.5 tackles for loss, 15.5 sacks. And Tim, as you know, Anthony Zettel all over the place, 38 tackles for loss in his career, 20 sacks, even picked off 4 passes. This was the defensive front that tied with Arizona State for the most sacks per game in the country. But that's the trick in college football is you're developing all these guys, then you unfortunately lose some of your best players each and every year, and you got to fill the gaps with some unknowns. Garrett Sickles, a proven commodity at defensive end, had 3 sacks last year, so it kind of starts with him, Tim.
Yeah, it does. It's going to be up to Sickles to help pick up some of that slack where Carl Nassib left off on the defensive end. You also see Evan Schwann, who's been stepping up over the last year in practice. He's expected to, who knows, maybe he could have a Nassib-like breakout season. You never know. No, this time last year, I mean, were any of us talking about Nassib? Pretty sure we weren't. So you could definitely see Evan Schwann being that guy who steps up. Obviously, no guarantees, but if you're looking for reason to not be so sky is falling regarding the departures of Zettel and Nassib and Johnson, then those are 2 guys you look to. Also, Parker Cochran, defensive tackle, is expected to step up. He's been getting rave reviews in practice. Another guy to keep an eye on is Kevin Givens. He was a last-minute flip in the class of 2015. He was committed to Pitt up until a couple days before signing day, and Penn State managed to flip him. He's a local kid out of Altoona area high school. Altoona is about 40-ish minutes away from State College. Big high school rivals there. But you may see him potentially, maybe not start right away, but you could definitely see him as part of the rotation. And other names to keep an eye out on, Ryan Buchholz, redshirt freshman. He was, he drew a lot of praise when he was initially recruited. Antoine White, another name to keep an eye on. Torrance Brown, he's a redshirt sophomore. That's another name to keep an eye on. He in limited time last year, he was able to make somewhat of an impression, and he could be in line for more playing time this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Brown in particular, not on the field a whole lot, but just to kind of segue, 5.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. So he obviously got into the backfield in limited playing time. Cochran and White, they got onto the field as well. As you mentioned, 25 tackles between the 2 of them. They both had a tackle and a half for loss and about 1 sack each. Daniel Joseph's a guy that we talked about before we hit the record button, who's awfully impressive coming out of Illinois. Anybody else that stands out to you?
Other guys besides Joseph, who was really kind of a out of nowhere kind of commitment. So normally when Penn State's going after these bigger fish, the recruiting sites tend, like Lions 24/7 or Fight on State, they tend to bring them up as like a target and say, oh, this assistant coach at Penn State visited, so-and-so today. And you keep hearing stories about them. But Daniel Joseph's was one of those things, like you woke up the next morning and boom, we had Daniel Joseph. So, but he was definitely, he's been given the proverbial red light by James Franklin, which is a thing that he uses to, which basically is saying that he's definitely going to redshirt this year. So he'll probably, but he's definitely a name to keep an eye out on in 2017 and beyond. Another name, Allison Jordan. He was the number 19 rated defensive tackle in the country. Four-star out of Baltimore, Maryland. Got him out of Maryland's backyard. He's also got the red light, but also another name to keep an eye out on for next year and beyond. Couple other names I should mention. Shane Simmons. I think at one point he was rated 5 stars. One of the top defensive ends in the country. I think it was down to Penn State and Florida State at the end, and he chose the Lions a full year and a half before he was able to sign the dotted line on LOI day. But he's got the yellow light, which means he may or may not see the field this year. But I think similar to Michael Mennett, I just think he's one of those kids that's just too good to redshirt, and I think they're going to find a way to use him at some point this season. Maybe it's as an extra pass rusher on third downs. That's what he's known for. He's known to just be able to get around the lineman and get to the quarterback untouched. So that's another name to keep an eye out on. Also, I should mention Sharif Miller. He's a redshirt freshman. Not sure how much he'll crack the rotation, but he was drawing some good reviews in practice last year on the scout team. One more name to mention is Tyrrell Chavis, number 4 rated JUCO defensive tackle in the country. He actually was a late arrival. He came just as two-a-days were starting beginning of August. He had some there were just some classes he had to take, and he had to wait a little bit longer for the admissions board at Penn State to approve him to enroll in classes at Penn State. But he did show up, and he's apparently very talented. You just gotta catch up on things, conditioning wise, and just learning the playbook. But that's one guy I would keep an eye on. You may see him crack the rotation by mid-season and perhaps be a key part of that D-line.
Yeah, Tim, despite losing the 3 studs, the thing that hits me is that you need depth at defensive line. And even though you don't have proven commodities there, when you have that much talent brought in from the high school ranks, and we notice as well that it's coming from usual Penn State territory, Philadelphia, you mentioned the 2 kids from Maryland as well coming in. When you've got 7 or 8 guys, the odds say that 3 or 4 of them are going to be players almost immediately. So that's a good thing when you have that kind of talent and numbers, that the odds say that few will be able to make an impact soon.
Certainly. I mean, that's like with obviously with getting the scholarships back, that's another area Penn State's been able to build back upon. Now, obviously, D-line was not as dire a situation as its offensive counterparts, but like you said, getting the Shane Simmons, Jordan, Allison Jordan, Daniel Joseph type kids in the last couple of years. And then also actually in 2017, they got a couple big commits. Most notably is Yetur Matos out of Fredericksburg, Virginia, 4-star defensive end. He's expected. He's another guy we expect to contribute sooner rather than later once he arrives on campus next year.
Penn State defensive front, one of the best in college football in 2016, a big question mark outside of Garrett Sickles and a few other guys that hit the field in 2015 as Penn State tries to contend in the Big Ten East. Tim Aydin from Black Shoe Diaries on the SB Nation platform for Penn State Athletics joining us. Tim, we appreciate it.
No problem.